This lesson is on debugging. This is your second debugging lesson. And remember that debugging is the term we use for troubleshooting problems in your programs and correcting them. So let's take a look at this form. Looks innocent enough. Number of apples in pairs. We've seen this before. 5 apples, 3 pears. Let's hit the submit button. Uh-oh. Got a number of things going on here. That looks strange to me. Let's start off with the error message. It says undefined index. Now, this next word is key. It's looking at something called apples, and it says that's an undefined index. And the other important thing is it's on line 14. You kind of know it's in the fruits program because that's what you called, and that's what's up in the address bar. Okay, let's go look at some code, shall we? So here we are in the HTML. The error, though, is in the fruits PHP, so let's start with there. Line 14, apples equals $post apples. This is the index that it's looking for, apples. It's kind of not a really clear word. For those of you who know something about arrays from other programming languages, this is called an associative array, where we pass a name to the field as an index, it's called, and then it fishes out the value from this special array that's set up. That didn't mean anything to you? Don't worry about it. Apples is the index of the post that it's having a problem with. So I wonder what's going on. Well, that looks right to me. Doesn't it look right to you? Let's go ahead and start with debugging technique number 1. I'm going to use an extra print statement. In fact, I always put a break inside of my debugging print statements because I like to make sure that everything begins on a new line. Otherwise, all of these extra print statements that I might use sort of flow together. Sometimes you can use a word debug. I put a colon. And now what I'm going to do, this is a trick that I want to show you. I want to make sure I'm really seeing what's in the apples variable. So I'm going to wrap single quotes around it to make sure there's no extraneous spaces or something in there that I don't realize. So I'm going to put a single tick and then a double quote to close off that string. Now I'm going to bring in the apples variable that I'd like to inspect, put it there, another concatenation symbol, double quote, single quote, double quote, semicolon. What that does is it wraps the value of $apples in single quotes because those single quotes are part of the string that will display on the window. Let's save that and let's go and see what that gives us. So I'm going to just run it by clicking on the little icon up there. I have to change this prefix information to localhost so it actually uses the WAMP server that I have downloaded. It would be MAMP if you're on a Mac. So I'm running that now. Let's try that again. I'll put 5 for apples, 3 for pears. Submit information. Says undefined index, the same thing. Debug -4. That's actually a different debug that I already have in there. I never even got to my debug line that I wanted to see. So it's quitting, really, before I get there. Let's take a look. Back to the code. It tries to show me this, and it just can't handle it. Now, what I do in this case, this word, where does that come from? It comes back from the HTML file, the form, the tag that I put in there. Let's make sure that the names are the right. So let's go back to the HTML, and I come back and I look at where do I enter apples? I have number of apples, input, type equals text, name equals, apple. I was looking for apples with an S. That's not right. Those two things have to be the same. Let's make that apples. Save that and try it again. So in this case, the problem was kind of in the HTML file. So let's go back. We'll run it again. I'll change this to localhost. Hit the enter key. Run it. Put in 5 and 3 again. Now, debug 5, debug 1. Okay, 5 was the one that I had for apple. It looks like I neglected to put a break on this debug thing. See how they all run together? I have another debugging statement that I had pre-put in there, and I forgot to put a break in front of it so you can see the negative effect of what that looks like. Let's go back to the code. Let me find that other debug. Here it is. If I want to be consistent, I'll go ahead and capitalize it. Put the break in front of it, and now it shouldn't run together. Well, why did I even bother with that debug? Let's go back and take a look at the form. Down here, I have number of apples, then pears is 1. The reverse of that is 1. Well, the reverse of 1 is not 1. It should be -1. So I was trying to display what was in there. Let's go ahead and run this now that I've corrected the program. Here we go. Debug 1. Now, if I needed more information, I could have said what that was. I could have, in my debug statement, put in the variable name, perhaps. I'm going to copy this, put that in here. And I actually don't need this other one for apples anymore, so I'll comment it out. Come back to the table, run it, make it localhost, put in 5 for the apples, 3 for the pears. So 5 is 3, says the number of apples more than pears is 1. It's actually 2, so I've got a math problem as well, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. I'm just going to look at why this didn't get reversed. So I looked at the reverse diff, and gosh, it is 1, and that's 1. Let's go to the PHP. By adding this debug statement, it gets me really to look at what I see. And I noticed it was in quotes. There were no extra spaces. So let's go up a line, and let's take a look at how reverse diff is being created. I should be negating it. Uh-oh. I have minus minus there instead of just 1 minus. That's not right. I should just have 1. Let's try that now and see if this works. Come back. I run it. 5, 3. Whoops. You know what I did wrong here? I forgot to change this to localhost. But since this is a presentation on how to make errors and correct them, that's okay. Localhost. Hit the enter key. Enter again. 5, 3. Submit the information. So now I can see that I've done the math correctly now. Somehow I took care of the other problem when I took care of that last one. The minus minus decremented the value before by 1. It was 2, and then it got decremented by 1 again. That's what the minus minus does. I hadn't actually introduced that in the math lesson yet, but you'll see that in some code, and we'll probably use that later on in the class ourselves. So, the number of pairs is 2, and the reverse is -2. Life is good. But wait a minute. I have an end up there at the top above the table. That can't be right. Most of the time, I want to put an end at the end. Let's go look at our code. Over to the fruits PHP. I'm going to go down here. Here's the table. I open the table, right? I write out all these rows. Life is good. I print out end. In fact, I don't even print out end. It's just regular old HTML. And it clearly comes after the table. Table's all the way up here. So why did that appear above the table? Let's take a look at the code that was generated. This is another little technique. Do a view page source on your PHP page that's displaying and see what HTML was generated. Take a critical look at it. You might look at your code and think, I know what's going on, but sometimes when you look at the code that was actually generated, you'll pick up on something that's off. Notice we have a little color coding going on here. Okay, we've got the beginning table tag, and if you remember my little rule, what's the first thing you do when you have a beginning tag? Answer, you look for the ending tag. And where's the end table tag? Nowhere. It's not here. And unfortunately, that's a little quirk, that when you leave off that end table tag, this next paragraph gets confused. It doesn't know if it's in the table. These aren't table tags, the paragraph tags. And it ends up displaying it above the table. So I need an end table tag. Let's go ahead and try that. And I can put that before this paragraph. I've saved it. I'm going to go try to run it again. This time I'll change this beginning to localhost. Run it. 5 apples. 3 pears. Okay, we got that. We got the end at the bottom. Life is good. Clearly, before you put this into production, take out the debugging statements. This ends our Part 2 lesson on debugging techniques.